Welcome to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting live on August 6th from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. Hurricane Debbie made landfall at 7 o'clock yesterday morning near Steinhatchee, and some areas in Tampa Bay got 9 inches or more of rain on Sunday. There's some river flooding. We'll tell you more about that later. There's street flooding, storm surge, wind, and power outages. But overall, the region escaped major damage. Later on in this hour, we're going to speak to a meteorologist from the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. So I hope you prepare your questions right now. You can email us at dj@wmnf.org. You can text 813-433-0885. You can also phone in at 813-239-9663 if you have any questions about the storm or about this first topic that we're going to consider, which is the special case of older adults and storms. So let us know your experiences or your questions. Again, that's 813-239-9663. Our guest to talk about this is University of South Florida College of Behavioral and Community Sciences professor Lindsay Peterson. Lindsay is an assistant professor of aging studies whose research is on the impact of hurricanes and other disasters on older adults. Welcome to Tuesday Cafe, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad you could be on. Thanks so much. And so preparing for and going through a storm is really fresh on our audience's minds right now. So I thought I'd bring you on to talk specifically about storm prep for older adults and things that we should be thinking about. So we'll get to specific tips and strategies in just a bit. But what do people who are caring for older adults have to keep in mind when preparing for storms?
One thing is that it's usually always going to be different from you expect. Sometimes it will be a lot less than what you expect, but as we learned just this past weekend, it can be very different and much worse than what you expect. And I think a lot of people feel like, I've been through a lot of these, I can handle it. I know, I understand the needs of the person that I care for, and we'll be okay. But very often, when things become chaotic, especially when you're dealing with someone who has some kind of cognitive impairment, it raises the level of stress and anxiety and predictability and unpredictability to a much greater extent that can just throw a big wrench into your plans. And so the more someone prepares, the more someone thinks through what may happen and thinks about the worst and actually takes some steps, maybe some practice, the better able they're going to be able to deal with the unexpected thing that happens, or kind of the crisis, maybe the emotional crisis that results. Say you've got someone who is refusing to leave the house. Ordinarily they don't have a problem leaving the house, but they're scared about what's happening, and they will not go. So you need to think about how you're going to do that. I know we interviewed a lot at several caregivers for this research that we did, and one of them was totally surprised that when she started to board up her house, put up the hurricane shutters, her father, whom she cared for, freaked out. He felt like he was being shut in. He refused to stay in the house with the shutters on. And this is something she had never thought about before and had to deal with right there at the time while they're trying to put the shutters up. And so whatever it is, it's a matter of thinking through what this person's needs are every day on a normal basis and how you're going to meet those needs when everything is very abnormal and all the emotion and anxiety is ratcheted up.
I want to remind people that our guest is University of South Florida College of Behavioral and Community Sciences professor Lindsay Peterson, and we're talking about older adults, people who are caring for older adults, and storms and storm preparation. And so far as some of the advice that we've had is to prepare for is anything that could happen. A lot of different things could happen, and just be prepared. So you are developing an app, a mobile phone, app, to assist older adults in disaster preparedness, decision-making, and things like whether to evacuate or to shelter in place. What are as you're developing this app, what are some of the kind of points of decision and concerns that people should start to be thinking about?
Yeah, well beforehand, you need to think about, should I stay or should I go? And that's a pretty basic instrumental decision that you can make based on the location of your house, the resilience of your house, what may happen. First off, think about what may happen, because then every decision flows from that. And so this is how we organize it. It's one of those kind of tools where you're asked some questions and you make some choices. And based on the choices you make, it takes you to a next set of questions. And so that first one is what's likely to happen, or what do I need to be prepared for? Could be a fire, could be wildfire, could be flood, could be wind, anything that's possible. I mean, even, we learned with the pandemic, what do we do if we have to be confined here together? And so then this is pretty much designed at this point for hurricanes. So the next question is where am I? Am I in a flood zone? And, am I near the coast? And even if I am near the coast, what's my risk? But even if I'm not near the coast, I might still face some risk because I've got a stream nearby. And one thing, again, that we learned this weekend is that places that are far, far from the coast can experience deadly flooding. And this happened right where I was living. I live near the Manatee River Dam, and we had to evacuate yesterday morning because they had to do an emergency release of water from the dam. And this is something I had never thought about before. It's very, very hard to think about the kind of thing that's unlikely to happen. But as I was saying earlier, that's the main thing to do. But so for here in Florida, first off, you think about where am I located? What's my flood risk? What's my risk of going underwater? And then if you don't have that risk, there's a series of other things you need to think about. Will my house stand up to a hurricane? Do I have hurricane shutters? Do I need them? Will my roof stay on? What do I need to do to try to take care of some of these things? And there's some kind of little basic things we have in there. For instance, if you have a garage, and if you can shut the garage door, there are ways to secure that garage door. And some research that came out of Hurricane Andrew a long, long time ago showed that if you can simply secure your garage door, that you go a long way toward protecting your entire house. So these are the kind of basic things to think about that we emphasize with this, because these are things that you can think about beforehand, just describing your situation. And from there, it goes on to what you need to do in this situation or that situation. And so we pose a series of questions about, if you're going to evacuate, where are you going to go? The person you care for, or yourself, or whomever you're with, a child, an adult, anybody, how long are they able to ride? And what do you need to take with you? So plan out your trip. How much gasoline is it going to take? What do you need to have along the way? Not just to ensure that people are taken care of, that they have their medication. Medication is huge, huge, huge. But that they would have the food they need, and especially someone who is likely to be anxious, a child or an older adult. You need to bring some things along to create a sense of familiarity, a sense of comfort, and anything to reduce the sense of anxiety and panic. So think about all those things you need to have with you, not just for the physical safety and security, but for emotional security also. And think about the things that you're going to need when you are at your destination. And then there's a whole other series of things that are very similar that you need to have at home. And I'll say one of those things is multiple light sources, because you could be thrust into darkness, especially, if your house is boarded up and your electricity goes off at any time of the day, you're going to be in darkness. And again, that can be a very, very difficult and panicky situation for someone, especially someone with dementia. And so there's ways to plan for that. How can I ensure I have light all around? How can I ensure that I have batteries for all the lights that I have? How can I ensure I've got the foods that people want to eat? Kind of think it all through beforehand. And those are all things, many of these are things that you can get beforehand, and you can plan your responses. How are you going to explain what's happening, whether you're at home or whether you're traveling? And a lot of these, whether you're traveling or whether you're at home, a lot of it is the same. Basically, when you're traveling, you just kind of have to be a rolling residence, have all those things with you. But again, I want to emphasize medication. It's really important to have all the medications that you need on hand, possibly for a long period of time. After Hurricane Irma, a lot of places were cut off for a good while. And a lot of places were without electricity for more than 2 weeks. And so that's another thing to think about. How am I going to survive without any source of electricity? So one other thing is really good to have a lot of those little battery packs, those things that you can plug your cell phone and other devices in to ensure you have power. So that's a really important thing, is having a power supply so you can contact people. And the other super important thing is to make sure that you've told your friends and family what the plan is. And if you're going to be home or if you're going to be traveling, where you're going to be, and stay in touch with someone as soon as you possibly can before the crisis occurs, and then make a plan to be in touch with them at some point in the future. Say if it's a hurricane, after the hurricane has passed, maybe even a place to meet up, but a way for people to know what's happening and where they can find you if they need to, and what they need to do if they can't get in touch with you. Social contacts are super important, especially with someone who's possibly outside the zone, who would not be cut off themselves, who would be able to come and try to reach you or contact some emergency people who might need to do that.
Our guest is Lindsay Peterson, University of South Florida College of Behavioral and Community Sciences professor. Lindsay's an assistant professor of aging studies whose research is on the impact of hurricanes and other disasters on older adults. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we are broadcasting live from the studios of WMNF Tampa on August 6th. So if you have any questions, or if you would like to share your story, you can email us at dj@wmnf.org. You can text 813-433-0885, or you can phone in at 813-239-9663. And one of the things that you were talking about, Lindsay, was evacuations. But I imagine that the population that we're talking about, older adults or possibly people with cognitive that are cognitively impaired, might have a resistance to evacuation. Is that something that you found?
Yes, a lot of people don't want to evacuate, of all ages. And we do focus on older adults, and I think rightly so in a certain way, because older adults are more vulnerable. They're more likely to suffer a heart attack, have a stroke. I mean, this is what happens after storms, where we see much higher level of death and hospitalization after hurricanes and other tragedies, because people are more likely to have a heat stroke, for instance. They're more vulnerable, and we've had so many issues with heat, and we'll continue to have. And I know they're talking about defining heat now as distinct disasters, but it's much older bodies have a much lower tolerance to rising temperatures. So it's much more important that someone who has any level of vulnerability is taken out of a dangerous situation. Younger people possibly can survive. I mean, this sounds kind of horrible, but during Hurricane Ian, that brought so much flooding to the Fort Myers area, people told stories about having to swim away from where they were and having to swim over to and grab onto the balcony of the condo nearby, with the water up to the second story of that condo. And that's something someone can do at a certain age. You can't necessarily do that when you're 80 or 90, and especially if you're confused and maybe are not even mobile. So it's much, much more important to think about that. But there's a reluctance all across the board for people to evacuate. And sometimes it can be more pronounced with someone who is older, because if they're in a home, for instance, this could be their last possessions. This could be the last place they're going to live. It's kind of easy when you're younger to think, oh, it's just stuff, I can replace it. It's harder when you're older to think this, I can't imagine leaving this place. And that does happen. Sometimes people just delay, they delay for too long, and we still don't quite know exactly where these things are going to hit. And in the case of Hurricane Ian, by the time they had a really good idea when and where it was going to hit, it was a little too late to get out on the road, and a lot of people tried, and they died in that process too. So it comes down to a point of, if I leave, am I going to be at risk? And especially, with an older person, and you've got someone who's caregiving for an older person, the idea of sitting in traffic for 5 hours, it's unthinkable. It would not be possible with people in certain situations. And so that's what shelters are for. And there are public shelters in every county, and special needs shelters for people who have certain needs for electrical devices, and they might have some medical personnel there. And people need to make use of those shelters, and there's a huge reluctance to do that on the part of people, especially older adults and people caring for an older adult, particularly if they have dementia, because they're worried about how they may react in the foreign environment, because these shelters are noisy and can be chaotic. Now, I've been hearing about shelters that are working really hard to try to create softer and quieter areas for people. They do this in airports. We have these comfort rooms in airports, and so there's a discussion about trying to replicate those in shelters, and I think that would make a big difference. I know the Alzheimer's Association right now, I'm working with them on their efforts to train shelter workers. And a lot of workers are trained in dementia, but still trying to kind of increase the level of training they have, and improve the environment that they're in. And so, but when it comes down to it, it's really important to communicate to people, caregivers, and older adults that the shelter is better than the horror of being stuck in their house and being stuck in a flooded house or a home that is destroyed. Because where we hear this often from the emergency managers is that there's a period of time right before the storms hit and afterward where it's impossible for anybody to come out and rescue people, and they all these requests for rescue in the immediate hours after these things happen, and they just can't get out and get to everybody. So people will be stuck, and so that's another thing to think about that we all need to work on, is how to make the shelters better, but how to convince people, and how to be prepared to take someone to a shelter. And there are steps that you can take as a caregiver to try to do your best, to try to make the environment more tolerable. But this reluctance to evacuate is universal. It's just much more important for people who are vulnerable.
When a storm is approaching, I know I have go-to sources. I have certain Twitter handles, or I guess they're called now X, or websites that I would go to access emergency information about knowing what to expect, how to prepare. But I imagine there will be barriers to access for some of these things for people with cognitive impairments or people who are aging. So what would you suggest, or what do we know about access to emergency information for this population?
There is a ton of information out there, and that is actually the problem. It's almost too much. There's some really excellent guides that I've found in doing this research that FEMA's put together and other organizations have put together on how to prepare as a caregiver, how to prepare for yourself and the person you care for. And one thing that we learned in the research that we did with actual caregivers is, one, they weren't aware of any of this. They didn't know where to find it. And these were people who did they spent a lot of time online looking up information to try to understand other ways to help provide care for the person. But a lot of them didn't know about these resources, and the ones they knew about, it's like, I'm not going to read a 10-page guide. And I just don't, they don't have the time, the energy, and especially when so many caregivers are they're dealing with daily issues. And so that's one of the things that we are trying to tackle with this app. And with it, we the first thing we did is we created kind of a simplified guide for caregivers of people with dementia that the Alzheimer's Association has on its website for the in Florida. But this app is designed to try to make it as simple as possible. And there's sort of a sweet spot there because there's information that you have to elicit and provide, but to not overwhelm people. But it is, for someone who does have the time and the energy, there is a lot of information out there. Just, randomly Googling disaster preparedness for caregivers will bring up a lot. But there's a lot of really valuable information from FEMA. I have to say, we all have an idea about FEMA and what FEMA does, but FEMA produces some really high quality research-based information on disaster preparedness, based on the research about how things have to be fairly simplified. They've got these 1, 2, 3 guides. And so FEMA is a great source of information on disaster preparedness for older adults and for people who are caregivers. But also, I want to say that the county emergency management offices have a lot of real specific information about how to figure out where the shelters are and what zone you may be in terms of whether you need to evacuate. And the zones go, I think probably everybody knows, they go from A all the way up, with the lower letters being the higher vulnerability areas, A being usually the first ones to be evacuated. But they will start releasing information right away as a storm is on the horizon about what they know and what they are recommending that people do. And so there are ways to sign up to get this information. And it's pretty easy to do. And I would recommend people contact their county emergency management office to find out how they can be on this list of where you're going to receive regular text messages. You can register with the state of Florida Special Needs Registry. And that is something I recommend that everybody do. This puts a person on the radar for the state in terms of, the state uses this for planning. Now, they won't go to your house and get you when you register for the state registry, the register is on the special needs list. But they do know about you, and this is how they determine how to establish resources for when a storm comes. But the person needs to register with the shelter that they would go to. So you need to register twice. And so there's some barriers to this, but this is the way it works now. You need to register with the state to let the state know that you're there and kind of what the needs are. But then specifically to go to a shelter, a person, if they want to go to a special needs shelter, this applies most of all. They need to contact the shelter and let the shelter know they're coming and what the needs are of the person, that themselves and the person that they're bringing. And that's information that they can get at a county level, from their county emergency management office. And the other thing about this is you can't really do this in advance because there's a lot of potential shelter locations, but they don't actually designate them and get them up and running and let people know where they should go until fairly quickly before the storm comes. So it's just a matter of monitoring, beginning to look, making sure beforehand that you're on the list of people who will receive these notices. But then as the time is coming, we all kind of know these things a little bit beforehand, at least 3 or 4 days. So at that point, make sure that you're going to be receiving notices from emergency officials about what's going to happen next. And a lot of people will say, get yourself a weather radio. That's really cool to have because you can tune in and you can hear everything and kind of know exactly where the storm is and you'll know everything that the emergency officials know.
So far, we've talked mostly about people who are maybe living with a caregiver, perhaps, but the governor's office said last night that there were 5 assisted living facilities and 3 nursing homes that were reporting evacuation. So what kinds of special concerns would you have if your loved one is in an assisted living or in a nursing home?
That's a really good question. Nursing homes in particular are required by the federal government. The nursing homes are federally regulated because they take Medicare. And so the federal government requires some pretty specific disaster management plans of all nursing homes. And additionally, at the state level, both nursing homes and assisted living communities are required to have plans that they update annually, that they submit to the county emergency management office and receive approval for by that county emergency management office. So the best thing I think for a family member to know is what's the emergency plan. That's a written down document that they could see or that they could talk to the administrator about. And these facilities kind of have to go through the same planning process I was talking about earlier, and that is assessing what the risk is likely to be and how they're going to respond depending upon what this risk is that is occurring. And with hurricanes, they've had a lot of experience in Florida with hurricanes, and it's not gone so well in the past. I think Hurricane Irma was one that showed that Irma pretty much affected the whole state. And there were a lot of places that made evacuation plans, and they had plans for buses to come and take people to these evacuation sites. But what happened was the places they were going to evacuate to also were evacuating, and the buses that were going to take them were being used by other people. And so these plans now have to be 3 and 4 items deep. Don't just have one place to go to, have 5 or 6 different places that you could possibly go to. And so family members can know this, and they should know this. And there's supposed to be a family communication plan for assisted living communities and nursing homes. And so the families should be receiving updates and should be receiving information about how to contact the facility if they have to evacuate, to know where the facility is going to go, where the residents are going to go, and how to reach them there. And so this is stuff that all needs to be written down and planned for. And unexpected things happen. Though both nursing homes and assisted living communities do evacuate a lot. And this is a little bit counterintuitive, but one of the things that came out of some earlier research we did is that evacuation is not good for assisted living and nursing home residents, that there's a higher risk of mortality and hospitalization, death and hospitalization in those who were evacuated. Now, it's absolutely necessary in a lot of cases, but so nursing homes and assisted living facilities, if they're not quite sure what to do, sometimes they'll err on the side of staying because that is better for the resident. And so this is something that, families need to kind of be aware of and think about, and they will give families the option of taking the person home with them if they want to. And this doesn't always work out. And the one thing they learned during Irma was that families would take the person home and need to bring them back fairly quickly, especially if it was someone with dementia. So a family needs to realize if you're going to bring a family member home, you need to understand exactly what their needs are and be ready to take care of them.
Well, Lindsay, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much for all the great information. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on Tuesday Cafe.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
I really appreciate all the information. Lindsay Peterson is a professor in the University of South Florida College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. And you are listening to Tuesday Cafe, broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. And we're broadcasting live on August 6th. And if you'd like to call in and share your stories or ask your questions we're going to talk shortly with a meteorologist, you can give us a call at 813-239-9663. You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org. Well, right now I want to bring in our meteorologist, Megan Borowski. Welcome back to WMNF's Tuesday Cafe, Megan.
It's always great to be here, Sean.
I appreciate you coming on. I know you're super busy this week. You're a meteorologist with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network, so maybe this will be a good time to just remind people, what is FPREN?
Absolutely, Sean. So we are a group of meteorologists. We work out of WUFT on the campus of the University of Florida. But the beautiful thing about our group is we provide weather coverage and updates for our NPR and all our radio partner stations across the state of Florida. So we are covering it and bringing information before hard-hitting weather events and during hard-hitting weather events when it matters most. So you'll hear us on the air if we have a tropical system threatening your immediate area. or if there's a cold front or some sort of very impactful weather event. When you won't hear us is when it's nice outside and sunny and 75. That's when you don't need our broadcasts. But when there's an emergency situation like we had with Debbie yesterday and still ongoing for parts of North Florida, that is when we are here to communicate any and every piece of information that can keep the public safe.
I think right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe in the Tampa Bay region, the thing to watch out for the most right now is because of all the rain that we got is river flooding. We are in different counties, we're under river flood advisories and warnings. What do we know about how much rainfall the region got and why that's a danger to the river flooding?
Absolutely. So, yesterday, storm totals that started to trickle in after the bulk of Debbie's rain shield moved out was anywhere between a half a foot and over a foot of rain. Parts of near Sarasota and also near Bradenton recorded about 16 inches of rain. There were local reports there. 8 to 10 inches aren't out of the realm of possibility farther inland or in the inner Hillsborough County. As well. And so, all this rain needs to go somewhere. And over the next few days, it is going to attempt to drain through local waterways out into the Gulf. But these waterways are inundated right now. And another threat that we're going to have for the rest of the day today, and really even to the start of the day tomorrow, are some quickly moving bands on the southern edge of the circulation of Debbie. Debbie right now is crawling over southeastern Georgia and South Carolina. It has a very slow forward motion. And so we're going to be on the southern edge of circulation for pretty much most of the day today. And we'll have the potential for quickly moving downpours over our area. They'll be isolated. Right now, we do have a few near Lake Okeechobee and then southward toward Alligator Alley. So none really in the vicinity of the Tampa metro. However, we'll have that chance, and really any additional moderate to heavy rainfall is just going to exacerbate the situation. And the flooding of creeks and rivers will likely continue for the rest of the week, especially for locations closer to I-4.
As the storm was approaching, we were seeing warnings for storm surge of 2 to 4 feet in the Tampa Bay area, and higher than that where the landfall was expected, and it eventually came ashore at Steinhatchee around there. What do we know about how much storm surge in Tampa Bay and what the worst storm surges were in the state? Is that something that you have?
I don't have any official recordings right up in front of me. I will say that it seemed like as the event was unfolding that the NHC forecast was verifying, especially closer toward where the storm made landfall. I did see imagery coming out of Tampa Bay from emergency managers of flooding of roads that directly paralleled the bay. I saw Bay Shore was flooded. So I would assume right now that those forecasts did verify that we did get 2 to 4 feet in the Tampa Bay area. But as meteorologists get to go out and do those storm surveys, we'll know for certain. And as we get those readings from tide gauges and things like that, we'll know for certain if the actual forecast verified. But I can tell you from the imagery that I saw, flooding was pretty substantial leading up to the storm as well on Saturday and Sunday in Tampa Bay.
We were told to be on the lookout in case there were tornadoes during the storm, and we got quite a number of tornado warnings. In fact, even today, I saw on the Florida Storm's Twitter app, or the X, you guys were posting that Orange County and Seminole County had a tornado warning this morning. So that's these bands that you were talking about that are so far south of the center, which is in Georgia and South Carolina, but we're still have the possibility of isolated tornadoes.
Absolutely. And so that's something to always consider. And we always try to communicate that when there's a tropical system threatening a particular region, you could be hundreds of miles from the center of the storm, but you could still have quite impactful and life-threatening weather. We saw that even several years ago in the lead up to Hurricane Ian. Of course, that storm made landfall in the, down in the Fort Myers area. But several days before landfall, we had hurricane outbreaks down toward the Miami metro area. So, even though the bulk of Debbie is now over Georgia and South Carolina, we'll still have those threats today. And even with these bands on the southern edge, their tornadoes aren't as frequent on the southern half of circulation of a tropical system. However, they are possible, and we will likely see a few more warnings today. And something to keep in mind, too, is these bands are very quickly moving. And so when you see these tornado warnings come out, it will likely, mention in the storm motion that they're racing at like 40 or 50 or 60 miles an hour. So if a tornado warning is issued for your area at any time, and today especially, heed those alerts immediately, because these storms can quickly arrive to your area and take you off guard. So have a way to get alerts. We can't stress that enough. Enable them on your cell phone, and make sure that you have a place to go. You know where that place is that you would shelter if an alert is issued for your area. It really could be the difference between life and death.
And someplace you might shelter would be an interior room, for example, in a bathroom or something like that, if it's in the interior of a house?
Absolutely. You want to put as much distance between yourself and the outside and the storm as possible, because the threat here is going to be debris that's lofted into the air. That can, obviously kill you if it lodges, if it hits you. So you want to put as much distance between yourself and the outside, be away from windows, any glass that could break. So a bathroom is a good spot on the lowest level of the floor. In the bathtub, if you have a mattress that you could drag into the bathroom and put on top of you, I know that could be a little logistically difficult. Something that might be easier to do is have a bicycle helmet or some sort of helmet that you can strap on, if you have an alert and you need to run into the bathroom there. Just taking 5 minutes to think about where you would shelter, identify that location, even in your workplace, identify where you would go, have that in your brain. That way, if an alert is issued, you can just enact the plan and you don't have to think, where do I go? It's these little things that can really make a difference when the weather turns violent and dangerous.
Our guest is Megan Borowski, a meteorologist with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF Tampa. We're talking about Hurricane Debbie, Tropical Storm Debbie now, and some things that we've learned over the last few days of watching this storm. One of the things is that the governor said about 17,000 linemen were mobilized to assist with power restoration efforts as needed. How widespread have the power outages been, and has power been restored for most of Florida?
I don't have the outage map pulled up in front of me. I can tell you we were tracking it, roughly as the storm was making landfall, and the majority of our power outages were in the vicinity of landfall. So over, Dixie, Taylor, Lafayette County, Suwannee counties, over the Big Bend where you had the strongest winds. I can tell you, we're broadcasting here in Gainesville from the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. When I was headed into the studio yesterday in Gainesville, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had some pretty stiff winds even farther inland. We did have power outages across Alachua County as well. I can pull up the power outage map really quickly and give you just a rough estimate, to take a look and see how many customers have been restored. Looks like over the state of Florida, the worst of our outages are still over Taylor and Dixie counties, Lafayette County, even Jefferson County, just east of the state capital. Alachua is not as bad. Really looks like the extent of it is that bullseye, though, in the path of landfall, with the worst of it just along and just inland of that Big Bend region. I would assume, the linemen are working around the clock to get it down. Right now, it looks like about 109,000 customers are out. This is according to one website. I wouldn't, take, these numbers 100%, but I would say roughly 100,000 customers are still out in Florida, which we know that for those 100,000 customers, that is not the ideal situation. However, we're thankful that it's not worse because the linemen can focus on that particular region and try to get those customers back, powered up as soon as possible.
With the winds, of course, there's going to be tree limbs down and other debris. The governor's office said the DEP has issued an emergency final order allowing for the activation of disaster debris management sites to store and process storm-generated solid waste and debris. So if people have debris on their property, and they are concerned that they don't want it to become a projectile in the next storm, whether there's a tornado warning or whether we get a hurricane in a few weeks or whatever. What would you recommend? I don't know if I'm going beyond your scope, but what would you recommend for people to do with the debris that's on their property?
Well, first of all, I would say know your limits. First of all, check conditions if you're going to head outside and attempt to clean up. If I know there's a wind advisory in effect up here for us in North Central Florida. It doesn't extend as far south as the Tampa metro area. However, check conditions in your immediate area. Do not attempt to clean up if you have an outer band coming through, if winds are picking up, because that puts you in the immediate line of danger. Know your physical limits. Do not exert yourself and cause a health problem. If you have physical limitations, do not attempt to be a hero and clean things up in your yard, because you'll only test the limits of your physical ability there. I would also say, check with your local municipalities and with your local counties officials, because I'm sure they have more information on the exact details of storm debris cleanup, of where to put it for public works to pick up as well. But my two recommendations, though, there from the weather side of things, is make sure conditions are okay before you venture outside, and also, take those physical precautions as well.
All right, so that is Hurricane Debbie. We want to talk now, just before we wrap up here, about preparing for the next storm. I know, people might be thinking it's late in the hurricane season, but there's still so much more of hurricane season to come, and we could get more and more storms. So what should people be doing right now to prepare for the next storm?
Well, I would say assess what happened to your property with this event. This was a multi-day event for the Tampa area. We had outer bands come through on Saturday as the system is just entering the Gulf. So we had about 3 days, and if you count today, 4 days of impacts from Debbie. But they aren't as bad as they could be. I mean, we could have a storm impacting the eye wall, impacting the immediate area. So assess what went well with your storm prep for this event. Assess the vulnerabilities of your property, maybe where the preventative measures or where your plan failed, and come up with an actionable plan where you can reinforce your property, where you can reinforce your emergency kit, make that emergency plan better. Because we can tell you there will be another storm. When that storm will be, I can't tell you right now. It might be this season, it might be next season, but use this storm as kind of a learning experience, and give yourself a grade on your preparation and how well you executed it, and go in and make it better. The goal here is to have as little impact to your property and to preserve your life when these really dangerous storms come on through. And so, making those plans better, that is my biggest suggestion.
And a hurricane prep kit should include what?
Enough water, a gallon per person per day. I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 days. I know that is a lot of volume in wherever you're living. I would say, non-perishable food items. If those are canned, make sure you either get cans with a pop top or with a can opener. That's happened a lot, where you get the cans, but not a can opener, a mechanical one. A NOAA radio, either one that's battery operated, make sure you have batteries, or a hand crank radio. I would say, very basic tools to put in, hardware tools to keep your house at least, as a safe shelter during a storm. So I would say a tarp and things to secure that tarp. Sturdy footwear for in the aftermath of the storm, if you're going to be needing to go out and about walking. Comfortable and functional clothing that will keep you covered and safe. Any sanitary items that are important as well, hand sanitizer, things like that to keep yourself clean. One other thing, Sean, that I have to stress is, any medications that are necessary on a daily basis. This isn't your vitamins and supplements and things, like that. This is the, medications that you need to keep yourself functioning and alive. So assess that with your doctors. I do believe that you are able to get an emergency supply of those essential medications. And please do not forget your pets either. I'm a big proponent of pets and animals, and animal lover. So don't forget your pets either. Have a food bowl, have enough dry food or non-perishable food to keep them safe. Any of their medications as well. It's a lot. It's a long list, and only you know the needs of your family, the immediate needs of your family. And so that's why I stress, pre-season, during season, when things are quiet, really think about what you need, not luxuries, but what you need, and have that assembled and ready to go. In addition to those, food, water, and shelter items, I also stress any legal documents, proof of identification, and cash. Have all those on hand. Something else to do before a storm hits is to go around your property and take pictures, and this will help with insurance claims after the storm. To prove what your property looked like before, and then to show the damage afterward. So thinking about those things as well, but proof of identification, proof that you own your property, those things. If you're going to evacuate, tank of gas, Sean, I could go on, but the documents and non-perishable food and clothing and water are the main ones.
And my last question to you, Megan, is you are looking at the tropical weather all the time. You're looking ahead. Do we know of any storm systems that are on the horizon?
So NHC actually, I believe it was on Sunday as we were prepping hard for Debbie, they identified an area of interest over the Caribbean. It's just to the southeast of Hispaniola. So it's just actually to the north of the islands of South America on the north edge there. It does have a 30% chance for developing over the next 7 days. However, it does look like if something did develop, it would stay very, very well to the south of our area. I can check, one model run really quickly here while we're on the air, so you have the latest and greatest information. I don't see any evidence of this really organizing too much. And even if it did, it would likely impact Central America or the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So thankfully, nothing right now on the horizon to worry about. But as we all know, this can quickly change. We monitor tropical waves ejecting off the coast of Africa. And so we'll continue to do that. Hopefully we have a little bit of quiet time at the very least. So the folks in the Big Bend and really over Southeast Georgia and South Carolina can assess the damage and at least start to recover a little bit.
Well, I know I said that was my last question, but Wendy just wrote in and asked if you know when the next tax-free hurricane tax break is again, because she heard it covers animal supplies.
I know there's a second one. I believe it's around the time of Labor Day, and I will look that up right now because that is a very great question. So second one, it begins on August 24th, and it ends on September 6th of this year. And it looks like on here, I believe they did add pet supplies, pet beds, cat litter, dry food, pet carriers, portable kennels, over-the-counter pet medications, collars, leashes. There's a whole list. If you navigate to floridarevenue.com, they have on their website a list of all the eligible supplies, not only your human supplies, but also pet supplies and home supplies as well. So I would say check that out. We'll also have articles coming out on our social media pages where you can really look at that list. That is a great week to take an opportunity of the tax break.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on Tuesday Cafe, Megan. Absolutely,
anytime, and stay safe out there. Good luck with all the river flooding and the recovery there.
Thanks, and thanks for all your work with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. Megan Borowski is a meteorologist with FPREN, and she's been our guest on Tuesday Cafe today. And so we're going to finish up this hour with just looking at information we know about Hurricane Debbie, and if you'd like to call in and tell us your experiences, I want to know how the storm impacted you. Are streets flooded on your commute? Did you attempt to drive over the Howard Franklin Bridge when it was damaged? Speaking of which, this is a good opportunity for me to tell you about a current situation on the Howard Franklin. Here's the latest northbound, I-275 northbound on the Howard Franklin Bridge at mile marker 36. The two right lanes are still blocked there, are blocked there right now. So please be aware, it's causing some slowdowns. It's not it's not stopped or anything, but there are slowdowns on northbound Howard Franklin Bridge heading from Pinellas into Hillsborough County. I also want to know if you dealt with storm surge or flooding in your neighborhood, if you had wind or trees down or lost your power. Give us a call, 813-239-9663, if you're listening live on August 6th. Here's a story we have from Tallahassee. Margie Menzel reports that Governor DeSantis says Hurricane Debbie didn't do as much damage as some other hurricanes that have hit Florida, but there were 4 fatalities. There was a fatality in Gulfport we can talk about in a moment as well. There's still a lot of flooding, and here's the story from Margie Menzel. We'll be right back, but give us a call.
State emergency managers expect the flooding to continue when the hurricane makes its way to Georgia and further north. But given all the support and equipment that Florida mobilized in advance of Debbie, DeSantis said, the state didn't need to use much.
And I think that's the way to do it. We want to make sure that we're prepared for the worst and we hope for the best. You never want to have a storm, but compared to Ian and even Idalia, this one is not leaving the same destruction in its wake. We know there's a lot of water. We know that presents hazards, and we'll be ready to work accordingly.
At an afternoon press conference, the governor said 250,000 Floridians remain without power. I'm Margie Menzel.
Well, thanks to Margie Menzel from WFSU for that report. Thanks to our guest, Megan Borowski from the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network for her interview that we just had. If you have anything to say about Debbie, Hurricane Debbie or Tropical Storm Debbie, how it impacted you, give us a call, 813-239-9663. You can also email dj@wmnf.org. You can text 813-433-0885. This is WMNF Tampa. We have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to run through some of the warnings and so forth that we're under. Last night, the governor's office said there are boil water notices in Lake County, Marion, Lee, and Orange counties. And here are the river flood warnings. So I'm going to run through these, and this is really important if you live near these rivers. In Hillsborough County, there's a river flood warning in effect until further notice for the Little Manatee River in Waimama at US 301, and at the Alafaya River in Lithia, and at the Hillsborough River near Hillsborough River State Park. Also, river flood warning will go into effect tomorrow evening for the Hillsborough River at Morris Bridge. In Manatee County, there are 2 river flood warnings, the Manatee River at Rye Bridge and near Myakka Head at State Road 64. If you're in Sarasota County, be aware that the Myakka River is under a river flood warning at the Myakka River State Park. In Pasco County, there are 2 river flood warnings in effect right now. The Anclote River in Elfers at Little Road and Cypress Creek at State Road 54, Worthington Gardens. There are also river flood warnings in Citrus and Levy counties. That is in Denellen. And there is one in DeSoto County as well. So please be aware of these river flood warnings. Very important that you take these seriously and make sure that you're protected from rising flood waters. Last night, the governor's office said that overall, the state transportation system sustained minimal damage, which includes some isolated areas of wind damage and localized flooding. The governor teams continue to monitor water levels at low-lying bridges and major rivers crossings, including the Suwannee River, the Santa Fe, the Alsila, and Ochlockonoi rivers. I'm sorry, I probably got that one wrong. That's a river I'm not familiar with, but obviously this is up in the Big Bend area where there's some potential damage to low-lying bridges on these rivers. Well, thank you so much for listening to WMNF Tuesday Cafe today. I want to thank our guests, Lindsay Peterson, a professor at the University of South Florida's College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. We talked about elder care and hurricanes and storms and emergency management. We also talked to Megan Borowski, a meteorologist with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. This has been WMNF's Tuesday Cafe. If you missed either of these interviews, you can listen again shortly on our website, WMNF.org. During this time slot tomorrow, midpoint, we'll talk about changes coming to the Tampa Museum of Art. And coming up next is Wavemakers with Janet and Tom Scherberger. They will speak with 3 people working to bring arts education to people with disabilities. Then coming up at noon today is Wide Awake America with Nadine Smith. She's going to interview Maxim Eristavi, the author of Russian Colonialism 101 and the founder of the storytelling hub Volga. Maxim reported directly from Ukraine amidst the ongoing Russian invasion and delves into the history and impact of Russian colonialism and genocide. You've been listening to Tuesday Cafe, coming to you live on August 6th, 2024 from the studios of WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, Lakeland, Bradenton, Newport Richey. Thanks so much for listening and for supporting Community Radio 88.5 FM.